Okay, so here we have a very interesting pose, very graceful twist in the torso again, long extension of the leg. I'll try to be extra quick and also dirty with it without sacrificing the clarity of the drawing, but we can try to come in and be very loose. Let's find maybe the line for the buttocks and see how the spine here flows into that. Here it's almost straight, then we have a little pinch. This line should come up a bit. So I'm really loosely sketching. I don't have to be very true to the model, even though I want to capture the same feeling, same pose. So you see I'm quickly throwing in shapes, volumes that will help me establish whether I like it, what I'm doing, and if not, I'm just gonna change it. Even though I'm working quickly and fairly roughly, I'm trying to still consider the proportions and look whether I think they're accurately placed. The way she's resting on the seat here and how a shadow is cast, merging with the seat here is interesting to me. So a very general shape for the foot. You basically see the bottom of the foot. Once again, I'm trying to consider how large it should be, trying to take a step back if need be. And before long, I can start thinking about just massing in areas of light and shadow. Shadow is coming pretty far on this leg and it dips in for the calf, then over to the back. We see the spine, still some area of light hitting the lower lumbar part and of course also the shoulders, but this arm is definitely cast in shadow all the way. Let's find a little bit refinement for the fingers. Throwing in a simple, almost abstract shape to complete this shadow over here. With a very long line. Let me think, what do I want to do? Well, I want to find the shadow shape behind the foot here. There's this patch of light hitting the cloth. Then below here we get this nice cast shadow reaching the foot over here. And here it can definitely be very abstract. Maybe I want to squint and notice how the shadow is running off, or the dark values are running off from the leg into the background. A sense of the lines created by the drapery can't hurt. Maybe some nice dark value against the light side of the hip to emphasize that area. The little bun on the head. So a little bit more quickly and roughly. But not very carelessly. Let's see, this shape comes in a bit more. Yeah, like this. So, I'm liking it, I'm still squinting, and I can basically throw in some value. Laying the pencil flat, and here as well, being a bit more loose and carefree than with the previous sketch, but trying not to sacrifice the idea. So I'm still thinking about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And that means that I can very goal-oriented steer myself, guide myself in where to be loose, rough, all cool looking, and where I maybe need to pace myself and a little bit more of an accurate lay-in. For drapery, try to, where you can, follow the direction in which the cloth is folding, or actually the direction opposite to that. Do you get what I mean? It's really throwing all these values very loosely. From the foot, the sole, underside of the foot, into the calf shadow. So within a matter of a couple of minutes, I've created a very loose, but I would say clear value mapping. Let's make it more dark here than I might extract from the reference, just to create a little bit of balance, counterweight to all the heavy darks over here. Like I said, these background elements are usually very open to interpretation. Not always, but they can lend themselves to a little bit more of artistic license for us to make the foreground, the subject, read as we want it to read. So, quick little rough blocking, but this would serve well as a stage for refinement. Now, this refinement can be found in the line work, refining some edges that we might want to show clearly. Let's make this a little bit more smooth. I see a nice kind of bump here of the hip bone, and then the roundness of the glutes. I'll let it merge and sink into the shadow over here. I'll see a little bit of a dip here for the dimples. And even though it looks fairly committal, I can still smudge and erase and manipulate these values if I please, so if I want to do that. I'm a long way off from my darkest darks. So now a fun part is where we take a little bit of a smudging tool. Could either be our finger, which you want to make sure you keep clean. And I'm going to use multiple tools just to show you the difference in effects, and it's very subtle but nice to see. So with your finger you can take the dark values and wrap them into the light, and with this I suggest you try to follow the cross contours. So don't go in this direction or the opposite curve. Try to really roll over the form. So realize that that sense and understanding of the volume, the geometry is important. Another tool you could use is some tissue paper or toilet paper. Some people like to use kitchen towel paper, which is a little bit more rough in its texture. You wipe it to a nice little pad. This is a nice size for a sketch this way. This will create a little bit more of an even tone, which you can use to blend out strokes that you think are too dominant in the drawing. And once again, you could use it to drag the value from the dark into the light. Don't be afraid to color outside the lines, loose edges. It might just be what you need, and if not, it's very easy to refine these edges. You can erase some of the excess wiping that you've done. Squinting, I definitely want to make the overall halftone value on the lower back here dominant, and I can grab an eraser to lift out some of the very first sketch lines and really make the light hit the upper part of the back and the shoulders. Even a very strong crease along the spine here. And if we erase too much, we can come back in with the cloth or our finger. Don't try to aim for hyper-realism here. It's not about that. It's about a general sense of the values and their transitions. Maybe this part is also going to be a bit darker. Roll away into the shadow side. Most light obviously hitting this part and this part. The rest is already more subdued. Even the values here on the cloth, on the leg, try to still think about the form and wrap your strokes around it. Once again, if you overshoot and merge into the background, that's perfectly fine. Now I'm just doing whatever I think it takes to blend these initial values. Maybe have a look-see through the mirror, see what we think of it. One other tool you could use, and let me find a suitable one, is a blending stump, which I don't use very often, but sometimes for smaller areas it might be a nice addition. So this arm, it doesn't catch that much light. Once again, I could do this with my finger. I could also use a paper towel. It's a little bit dependent on your preference, and of course it's advised to experiment with them, get familiar with them. Notice that I'm almost completely losing the foot. And that's of course no biggie. We can get it back if we want to. Then I first have to get back my pencil. So hold on for a sec. Yes, I found it. So we might be happy at this point. We might want to punch in a little bit of the darkest darks. Where do we find these? Well, occlusion, ambient occlusion, where light can't hit. For example, next to the chin. Also underneath this armpit. And we can look for core shadows. We see how this part of the spine here is actually pretty dark. And we follow this curvature along the waist to refine the shapes and values. And we can, even though we don't see it, accentuate a core shadow along the edge where the light stops hitting the surface or the body. And over here, beginning of the butt cheeks, we see a sharp dark value, and we see a very broad core shadow, following of course this crescent moon shape, because the butt cheek is basically a sphere. On the other side as well. So I'm using the reference, but I'm also inventing. I'm also making use of the knowledge of general volumes to bring out the most communicative forms that I can. If I feel I need to refine or re-establish a line, I can. I'll make the entire hair here darker. Because I think that as a whole that reads more clearly, communicates more clearly, the form underneath. Never worrying about individual strands of hair, trying to force them into there. And once again, soften the transition between light and dark. And indeed, you could go for hours refining the values, the details, the shapes. As long as you don't lose sight and track of the overall shapes and clarity, and of course, don't lose sight of what it is you want to spend time and effort on. Maybe it's nice to lift out a little bit of that shell of the ear, see where it's located. If it doesn't work, then I can darken it again. Some very strong occlusion underneath the butt. And maybe find a blending stump this time. And lightly rubbing in the value. Remember that sharp edges create a lot of, or draw a lot of attention. And we usually don't see them with ambient occlusion effects. Let's me lift out just for fun's sake. A little bit of light hitting this calf. And at any point I could call it quits, which I'm about to do actually. Lightening this entire area now. Maybe bring back some of the light in the background. We can even throw in some abstract strokes following the curvature of the drapery. Create some interest in the background without being too dominant. Bring back some of the light hitting here and here. And you know what? Let's put in there. Let's soften this gas shadow. Lighten it and soften it at the same time. I think this is fine, maybe just refining a little bit of the detail work. And shape of this shadow mass. I'm basically darkening this because I see a nice little opportunity for some interesting shape of light hitting the top of the surface and then a little crease or fold inside this mass. And of course here the light is sometimes dragged into the shadow and vice versa. Well, let's create this strong contrast of light against the dark silhouette. Notice also that I've opted to exclude the hand on the far side. I think it won't add much to the gesture. And it'll only probably cause a little bit of confusion of what that is unless I make it very detailed. So I can omit it. It's my drawing. It's whatever I think works for the pose that I want to incorporate. I'll leave some of the strokes being a little bit textured, just to have some nice variety. Often an overlooked concept. It's a little bit of variety in the strokes. Also in, well, basically everything. You can have variety in your line work, variety in your edges, variety in the texture that you put down, which can add to the overall interest of the drawing. I think I still want to lift out a little bit of the light on the background and creating a suggestion of the shape of the calf here. And yes, I can definitely try to lift out the heel and the side of the foot. Maybe that means refining a little bit of the values with a very dark cast shadow, occlusion shadow, pretty dark underside of the heel. Let's not take it, or let's not go overboard with the refinement of this foot. But get enough of a value pattern to suggest the foot. It requires probably a little bit of detail, suggestion of the crease of the toes, maybe separate the big toe from the smaller ones. And sometimes it's best to just leave the drawing be for a while, take a coffee break, come back and see whether things read as you want them to read. Okay, well, I think that's enough for this demonstration. I would like to maybe refine the tilt of the head, the strength at which it's dipping in behind. The shoulder line here is a little bit lost, so I can see if I can still correct that, even though I've already put in so much values. That's already a little bit better. Maybe some quick strokes to suggest some hair strands causing shadow. Maybe even some touches with the eraser, although it's probably overkill. Some nice graphical lines. This is going to help establish the focal point. Maybe still some calligraphic line work. Veering off to the lower part of the sketch where we don't want as much detail. Still a little wash of value, smudging it a bit. Let's maybe find a hint of the contour of the lower arm or forearm right there. And like this sharp line of the upper arm. I can definitely take a relatively clean finger and lift some of the pastel very gently, creating a little bit of that sense of bounce light. But at this point, it's probably time to call it quits. Have one more look as objectively as you can to see whether you've achieved what you set out to achieve. Wrapping with the form. Let's have a look-see in the mirror. Well, don't really like what's happening here. It's a little bit too textured, I suppose. So let me throw in some value overall. Let me grab a piece of cloth and simplify the value. Yeah, it's looking better. To maybe re-establish the sense of core shadow and with with my eraser re-establish the tiny sliver of light hitting the upper side of the support. Yeah, I think that's about okay. Still a rough sketch, but an effective one. Okay. Once again, good luck, guys. Have fun.